Yeah.
Right there.
Do you want to show off your beautiful daughter? You guys may just hear me for a while. We're gonna stand.
If everyone wants to find seats, we're going to start. We're having some technical difficulties, but my voice is loud. Hello? So, if it turns on during the service, great.
Do you want us to take a look at it?
Hello?
Can Carla?
Well, I think you're going to control it from there.
Try to video?
This is
Will that
on.
work? Okay. Mom, trying to take your mom. This is my mom's sister's daughter, so great.
There's plenty of empty seats. Everyone in the back, come on in.
How to take your bag?
We don't have a microphone, so. Oh,
Oh, yes, we do.
darn it.
Get in here.
Go sit down. Go sit
I
down.
really didn't.
Go sit down. Yeah, go sit down. Kind of encourage people to sit.
If everybody wants to come in and fill up the seats.
Dave, I'll sit next to you.
There's a bit of.
Feedback.
Really, Maddie? I think.
Ah, there we go.
Just make sure to, I think, point the mic away from the speaker.
Yeah, Dad, point the mic away from the speaker. Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
I keep hoping it's not going to work and I can get out of this. Like, mic doesn't work. Welcome, everybody. I'm Richard's youngest and only son, Sean. Who are you waving to?
Carla.
Oh, Carla, come on up. Oh. There's still some more seats here in the middle.
I don't bite.
Kathy won't bite. All right, when we were all little, it's funny, a lot of thoughts have come up this last couple of weeks, but I remember when we were little in Korea, and we used to play this game called Monster, and my dad would put on a pair of nylons over his head, like a 1970s bank robber, and he'd chase us around the house making noises, and we'd all scream and hide. Being the youngest, I was always the last one to the hiding spot, and so I was always the first one sacrificed. So I was constantly being pushed out from underneath the bed to go satisfy the monster, or pushed out of the closet, always the sacrificial lamb. I'm saying this because last week when this service started coming together, I was nominated as the welcome person and the program manager. And although my sister Carrie would call it a call to service, I felt more like I was getting pushed again. So here we are. Today, after this quick welcome, we're going to have an opening prayer by LeVar Lenhart. Then we'll all speak. Richard's children will all have a moment to speak. Then we'll have an open time, open mic for friends, family, anybody who'd like to say anything or add anything to the services. And at the end, we'll have a grave dedication by Dean Barnes. So, LeVar, if you'd like to come up and start us off. Oh, from Albania.
They're
Well, he's
friends
not from
from.
Albania. Friends from Albania. Served over there with my parents.
Yes, see any beer?
Here, I'll hand this off to you.
Our Father in heaven, we bow before thee this special day to commemorate a great man, a great son of thine. We thank thee for the privilege that we have of knowing him and knowing that we'll see him again and continue the great love and friendship that we had with him before. We pray for the family, that thou wilt counsel and console them. and those of us who loved him for his kindness and generosity and sweetness of spirit. We thank thee for the gospel of Jesus Christ, whereby we know that again we will have a companionship. We thank thee for thy Son, for the great sacrifice he made for us, so that we can come together again as a great family. We love thee. We love Richard. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. So I did have the ability to decide who was going to go first. I just kind of want to hold this power for a little bit, sort of randomly pick. But I think I'm going to start it out so I can check out for the rest of the service.
You're going first?
Oh, do you want to go first?
No, it's okay.
I just mean I do it. And then
I'll change my opening. Take it. No, keep going.
no, do it. If you have an
No,
opening.
no, keep going. You're on a roll, kid.
Oh, all right, thanks. A couple weeks ago when my mom had asked that we all speak, I had no clue what we were going to talk about. And she's like, oh, just tell a story. There's so many stories, but in driving around and running errands with my sister Carrie, we started having a conversation one day about our superpowers. And we were going through like her friends and my friends and kids and what are their superpowers and what are their superpowers. Carrie's superpower is always being able to predict when she's going to get somewhere on time. And she's always on time. And I thought, man, what a bummer for all the GPS apps. Taking her power away from her. Chris, her husband's an internal compass of always knowing which direction he's walking or where he is. And a bunch of fun conversations have come up since then. Emma can remember movie quotes and song lyrics. Ben can convert Fahrenheit to Celsius without any formulas or calculators. But it's been a fun conversation with everybody. It led me to thinking about my dad and my dad's superpower. And man, that guy could make you feel loved. Like, I always felt like a rock star. Except for once or twice. There's been a couple times. I had this habit in high school of not being able to fit all my extracurricular activities into a day. So I'd sneak out the basement window when everybody fell asleep. One night they caught on and locked me out of the house. Didn't feel loved that night. But besides that, I remember throwing rocks up at Carrie's window saying, let me in the house, wake up. She's like, no, man, I'm not getting Dad up. So besides that, man, that guy could love. It was awesome. I remember some of my first memories when I was a kid in Malaysia. We had lived in this community and there's a big kind of grass play field in the middle of the houses. And I remember waiting for him to get home from work. And we'd go out there with a baseball, and he'd go, all right, bottom of the ninth. There's a man on third. 2 hours, 1 out. Fly ball's up, you're in center field, you know. Runner's gonna tag, and he'd throw the ball up like miles in the air. And he'd scream and mimic the crowd in the stadium. And he'd come running at me. I'd freak out, and I'd always drop it. So we'd do it again, a little less pressure. There's no man on third this time. Maybe it's a bloop to the first base side. Anyway, until we finally got it down with all the pressure and stuff. I remember him always making time. We lived in Indonesia after playing baseball for years. I remember wanting to pitch. And he's like, oh, you don't have enough control. You have to throw 9 strikes in a row before we'll let you pitch. So I remember every day I'd wait for him to come home from work because I wanted to just try it again. And he'd come home, sit in the yard. You know, I'd get 4, I'd get 5, never get 9 in a row. But he always made the time. And that one day I did. I got 9 strikes in a row, and lo and behold, that weekend I was pitching, came in the 9th inning, and that was it. I pitched ever since then. Through high school, playing baseball in high school, I was always on the mound, looking at a batter, a catcher, an umpire, and then my dad behind the umpire, behind the screen, yelling at me, "Throw hard, Sean, throw hard." Always making me feel like a star. There's a picture of me, well actually 3 pictures hanging on my wall in my bedroom from when I was 7 or 8 years old. We were at a beach, I think it was Malaysia, and it's just a series of 3 shots. I'm just off on my own, playing in the sand. And I've just loved that picture forever, and it's not, this picture's different. It's not the subject. You look at a picture and you see, you know, what the photographer's taking a picture of, and this picture to me, you look at it and you think, man, that photographer just loved that kid. That was my dad. Throw hard eventually became a rally cry for my father and I. Any difficult situation, raising kids, jobs, struggling in life, he was always there. Throw hard. Throw hard. As an adult, problems got bigger, you know, potential for disappointing your parents got bigger. Never disappointed, never angry. You know, always just sitting there telling you to throw hard, working through problems with you, never taking sides, just making sure you are comfortable with the decisions you were making, supporting you all the way. I don't think his superpower was so evident because how he treated me, but it's amazing to think of that love that I felt, and that there were 3 other siblings feeling the same thing, each with their stories, and how he had the time just to do all of that. It's just, it amazes me, like, what a power. I think all of his grandkids can probably attest. 2 a.m. FaceTime calls, random texts at crazy hours, him just trying to keep in touch with his clan and his crew, making sure that everybody was okay, not wanting to forget about anybody or what they were doing or what projects they were working on or papers they were writing. He was always there to the end, trying to keep in touch, keep an eye on everybody. It's funny, he also had this nickname, the Hawk. And we've talked about, like, where did that come from? It's something that isn't family related. It was his people in his office. And one of the projects he was working on, they all nicknamed him the Hawk because he always knew what was going on with everybody in the office building, everybody working on the project, papers they were working on. But he was definitely a hawk to us and his crew, always involved with us. So I guess I just wanted to thank him. Thanks, Dad. Throw hard up there. I'm picking Allison. Come on.
Well, my first line was, I get to go first in life as well as today, but I guess I don't get to go first, and then Sean led before me. I've been thinking for years, mostly with terror, about having to stand and talk on a day like today. You keep planning to be ready because you know it's going to be too hard at the time. And like my dad, I'm a project person. I like to plan ahead, what's going to happen next. And here we are at the time, and I'm not ready. And I'm never going to be ready because that's how it's going to be, because you're never ready to lose your dad. For a long time, I felt guilty Okay, I'm just gonna tell you guys at the beginning, like, I have a good first half of this, and then it all falls apart at the second half, but it's all gonna tie together at the end, so just hang with me as I go. So, for a long time, I felt guilty. My dad told me that he expected big things, capital letters, from me. My nicknames echo that expectation. My names are Big A, Big Al, and Big Time. A couple of weeks I broke down, and my son had to come and hold me and said, nobody's ever gonna call me Big Time again. I needed to change the world in capital letters. I had gifts that I promptly underutilized for the rest of my life, which is kind of how I felt. One night years ago, we were all together as a family, some get together in some country for a family trip, might have been Cambodia. We were sitting around the table, and my dad looked around at all four of his kids and said, wow, it is so cool to look at all of my kids. He said, you've all turned out so differently, and yet all so good. I wish we had a whole bunch more. It would have been so interesting to see how everyone turned out. I don't know if he had this conversation with my mother or not, but I kind of felt, and this confirmed for me, that there was a certain amount of experimentation that had gone into parenting. And as with all experiments, you don't always know what's going to happen. So several years ago, we did a thing called Storyworth with my dad. Jennifer, I think, set it up, you sign up and they send him a question every month. And he writes or answers the question, and at the end of the whole thing, you can take it and put it into a book, and you've got a whole thing. And you learn a lot about your parent that you never would have known because it's interesting questions. And so when I started thinking about this, and I was thinking about my dad and his kids, and I thought there was a chapter that was called The Best Gift I Ever Got. And I found the chapter, and it was actually called The Most Expensive Thing I Ever Bought. And I have decided not to examine that, but I'm just going to read the chapter. The most expensive, I'm going to call it the gift. The best gift I ever got was babies. They came from seeds in fertile places. They arrived with small round bottoms that were smooth as silk and soft as a cloud. They were cuddly and fun to hold. They made sweet sounds and peed and pooped. They were purchased sight unseen and came without warranties. The mother of the babies is a shopper supreme. She knows bargains well. So we bought 4 and we thought about more. Every one of these 4 kids will tell you that they felt like the favorite kid. We all did. We each had a dad that treated us as an individual person, listened to help us figure things out. We learned a lot of big things. How to think, how to write, how to edit, how to plan. And we learned a lot of more important things. How to treat people, how to be kind, and how to always remember the lilies. This is a talk my dad would always give. The first time I think I heard it maybe when Carrie got married. But the lilies were the kind things and the nice things in life. If you get a dime, you spend a nickel on bread and you spend a nickel on a lily. In my life, I've always thought of the lilies as the nice things, the spending times. Sometimes maybe for my mom it was oriental carpets, because I think that there were about 27 when we sold the house. But doing the nice things and finding the time for a flower, finding the time to take someone to a movie, finding the time to sit down and spend some time with somebody. And those are the things that at the end of the day make each one of us a good person. One of the best things, and you can't always think about, oh, what's the best thing about your dad passing? Well, one of the best things has been spending time with my 4 siblings. And when I look at it, like, I'm the big sister, but when I look at each one of them, they all know about the lilies. They know about it with their kids. They know about it with their mother. They take the time, and each one of them makes a difference in their life and in the life of the people around them and in their professional career because of the wonderful person that they became, because of the things that they learned from my dad. I'm going to read, this is from one of my dad's graduate students that he reconnected with. And sometimes It's about the difference that you make in other people's lives. And sometimes you don't know that you're making a difference when you're making a difference. And this guy's name was Frank Clementi, and I remember him since I was a kid. He says, I took a day in writing because I wanted to reflect about the impact that Dick Sturgis had on my life. As I look back on the 4 years I spent in Knoxville, Tennessee, it becomes increasingly apparent that he literally changed the trajectory of my future. When I first got to the University of Tennessee as a 22-year-old clueless graduate student, I was really a blank slate in sociology. In other words, I knew nothing and had been erroneously admitted to the department. Dean Champion, a friend of Dick's and director of the graduate program, had made a mistake in reading my transcript and thought I was a sociology major at Indiana. When I arrived to start classes, Dean was thoroughly shocked when he found out I was an English major who had only taken one introductory course in sociology, and it was a night class to boot. As he came to grips with the shock, Dean told me I would have to start by taking undergraduate classes rather than graduate classes. I agreed, and he placed me in a social thought class taught by Professor Sturgis. What a stroke of good fortune. I soon learned that Dick was a wonderful teacher, and even more importantly, a skilled advisor who was willing to work with me as I caught up to the other graduate students. In subsequent years, I took every course Dick taught, and I can't begin to tell you how many hours I spent sitting in his office in McClung Tower discussing sociology and other issues and learning how to think. He was always so generous with his time, willing to listen and advise. It was only years later when I became a professor myself that I realized how greedy I was to take up so much of his time and how unselfish he was to give it to me. I have had numerous graduate students over the years, but I know I never came close to being the mentor that Dick Sturgis was to me. In 1970, he directed my master's thesis, and it was a solid success as I eventually published 3 professional articles out of that thesis. In 1972, he directed my doctoral dissertation, and I published 2 articles out of that piece of work. In other words, under his tutelage, I published 5 articles during my time in graduate school. It was Dick who tirelessly critiqued my writing, suggesting changes and improvements, and helped take it to a professional level. It was Dick goading me and pushing me to write those articles and submit them for consideration. I built my career, but it was Dick who built the foundation. The contributions he made to my role as a sociologist pale into insignificance in regard to what he and Margaret did for me in my personal life. I came from a family devastated by poverty and illness. When I graduated from college, my family lived in the projects in Pittsburgh. As an only child, we only had 3 people at the dinner table, and when my father was ill, which he often was, there was just my mother and I. Imagine the eye-opening dimensions of sitting at the dinner table with the Sturgis family. Those 3 girls. I've often wondered what Margaret thought when Dick brought me home unannounced for dinner, as he very frequently did. Here comes freeloading Frank again. Knowing her generosity and kindness, I'm sure she accepted it with good grace and set a place for me as well as the girls. This was before Sean was born. Just eating with the girls was an experience in and of itself. Whether it was Allison and Jennifer under the table untying my shoes or teasing me about having a girlfriend, the dinner table was a joy I've never forgotten. All the time, Caroline did not know what was going on. This is continued in life sometimes, but she laughed anyway. I still smile and shake my head when I think about those dinners. Yes, even the mumps that put me in the emergency room. That was me. Thank you, Margaret and girls, remarkable women now. Dick and Margaret showed me what a loving, healthy, and generous family could be like. In Margaret, I found a model for the wife I wanted and eventually attained. It was at that dinner table and the give and take with the kids that I realized the incredible joy children bring to one's life. Indeed, I must have been impressed because Claudia and I wound up with 8 kids at our dinner table. But it was Dick's role as a loving husband and father that really changed my view of myself. I saw what he brought to his family and I thought, I can do that too. His values, guidance, integrity, and example helped me become a committed husband and a supportive dad. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm a better man because I knew Dick Sturgis. Incredibly, in just the 4 years I spent at Tennessee, he instilled a legacy of values that has lasted the rest of my life. I'm sorry he's gone, and each of you has my sympathy, but we will always carry him forward in our hearts because he left us a lot to work with. Best regards and love from Frank. So, oops. It's in the little things that we all make a difference. And there's a little, just a quote, and this is from Hobbit, from Gandalf. He says, "I found it is the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay. Simple acts of kindness and love." And as a legacy, I think that's what my dad, and that's how he lives on in each one of his kids and his grandkids. Because it's not the big things that matter, it's the little things and how you treat other people. And Jennifer gets to go next.
You should have let off. That was good.
We're all terrified to be doing this. But me the most. I'm usually the one that bails out. I'm going to read a couple things. It's easier to read than to talk for me. My dad, as you've seen, it was a good writer. And besides the storytelling program that we bought for him, he spent a lot of years, last few years, writing just different stories and just trying to write history, family history, and then just family fun stories. And this is a fun one. During 5 years in Knoxville, Tennessee, the Sturgis lived in 3 different houses. The first one was on Mountain Crest Drive. As the street name denotes, it was on top of a mountain on the edge of Knoxville. The house was on Dogwood Trail. We had interesting, pleasant neighbors in woods behind the house, and an occasional hissing possum. That's my watch. An occasional hissing possum in the garbage can. The owner of the home wanted to return, so the Sturgis moved to a very old, stately home on Tazewell Pike. It's just talking. Sturgis moved to a very old, stately home on Tazewell Pike. This was a pictorial southern home with a large wraparound porch that may have accommodated rocking chairs of the previous 80 years. And that huge yard that my dad would mow, and with all of the leftover grass, the girls would follow behind him and make big bird's nests. And we would be birds sitting in the bird's nest from my dad's mowing the lawn. It also had many inconveniences for those used to modern amenities. There was one bathroom. It was on the 2nd floor. There was a very large, non-modern kitchen and a huge lawn that begged to be mowed frequently. The brother of the owner lived next door. If the grass was not timely mowed, his presence made the guilt lie heavier as the grass grew. The house also had an adjacent, unkept and unused watercress farm. The watercress grew in a random, patchy way and was fed from a spring, around which cement walls had been built. The walled-in area made a pond about 10 feet square. The walls were 4 inches thick, and it was possible to walk around the spring atop the walls. There were very small fish and other water-related creepy, croaky, fun kid stuff. All in all, the spring and the watercress were pluses. Along with the house we rented, we inherited a quasi-feral cat that needed feeding. One day, Margaret said she smelled an odor, and it was getting worse. Margaret always smelled things first. Her genes were passed on to Jennifer, who, with appropriate training, could serve as a bird dog. Upon investigation, the cat had died on top of one of the other large hot air ducts and was in the process of cooking very slowly. Oh, I'm sorry. I have some animal lovers, I'm sorry. Without a cat, the mice were emboldened. This has to do with one of the main reasons the Sturgis moved to a 3rd house while in Knoxville. But I digress from the title of the story. And the story, I never said, was Santa Brings Coal to Naughty Children at Christmas. Like all good parents, we taught Allison, Jennifer, and Caroline, Sean wasn't there yet, the great universal truth.
Santa Claus brings coal to naughty children at Christmas. Arriving home from work one afternoon, I found Allison and Jennifer chucking something over the fence and into the watercress farm. They had lugged up a bucket of the old leftover coal from the basement and were rapidly throwing it over the fence. Parents have good reason to wonder if the moral stories, threats, and nagging ever do any good. They can, we have proof. The girls were not stupid, if all, during the fall of their parents kept saying, Santa brings coal to naughty children at Christmas. They were making sure Santa had to bring it a long way in his sleigh, as he was not going to find it at their house. Who knows, as I recall, Santa did not bring coal that year. Probably it was just too far to haul. I loved his story writing, and that was just an example for you. Also, my dad and his love of people. I wanted to say that my dad became my best buddy, particularly over this past year of us being together. I can vouch for his positivity and his forever eagerness to go get a Coke, an ice cream, run to Lowe's, fix a sink, watch a football game, try to watch a movie he couldn't hear or see so well at that point, or find somebody, one of his grandkids or close friends, to call and visit with. One of these other lifelong friends was John Stokel. He couldn't be here today, and I know he so wanted to. They would always joke about a boy from the streets of Detroit and a boy from Provo getting together and becoming the best of friends. John and Dad worked on many projects together, and even though they were far apart, they would try to work each other into their programs so they could still collaborate. Through all the years of never being in the same country, they stayed in touch through emails and scheduled phone calls. As the Parkinsons started to progress, John was there calling and checking in on Dad every day. John's daily calls helped my dad in so many ways. They both looked so forward to talking to each other. You'd think perhaps they would run out of things to say, but no, they could talk for hours about old work projects or people on the projects and where they are today. John knew Dad's doctor schedules, physical therapy schedules, gym schedule, and the people in it. He knew it all just as well as we did. Dad loved telling John anything new that he had learned that day. John was always kept up to date on every child and grandchild of my father. And as Sean said, speaking of the staying in touch, I think we'll all end up missing the 2 a.m. calls, the group texts that go awry. Dad was good at that, but always it was from his heart, trying to stay in touch with everybody. Dad recently gave a talk in church, and he wanted to read this poem, but he really wasn't able to anymore. We couldn't get the type big enough so he could read it, and he just couldn't memorize it enough to say it as it should be read. So I'll read it. It's titled Abu Ben Adem and the Angel. Abu Ben Adem, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace, and saw within the moonlight in his room, making it rich and like a lily in bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold. Exceeding peace had made Ben Adem bold. And to the presence in the room he said, "What writest thou?" The vision raised its head, and with a look made of all sweet accord answered, "The names of those who love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abu. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abu spoke more low, but cheerily said, "I pray thee then, write me as one that loves his fellow men." The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great wakening light, and showed the names who love of God had blessed, and lo, Ben Adem's name led all the rest. Carrie, you're up.
Here, I'm gonna give you this. We were kind of joking around, and I said, everyone's like, are you gonna hold it together? And I'm like, I'm just gonna turn around and we'll talk with my back to everyone, but I think I got it. For a little bit. All right. So it is true, I was the one that Frank said never knew what was going on. And that is pretty evident, but my dad always made me feel like I did. He would give me that grace, even when most of the time I really didn't know what was going on, and he would explain the jokes to me that everyone would tell that I never got. Okay, if you were to ask Siri or Alexa to provide the dictionary definition of Richard Bernell Sturgis, you would be treated to the following description: patient, listener, always available, goofy, resourceful, poetry lover, pie eater, ice cream lover, we shared that, mentor, storyteller, writer, editor, adventurer, Parkinson's warrior, the hawk, RBS, Ricardo, Superdad, PD, and the list could go on for several more lines. My family has so enjoyed these last few weeks spending time reflecting on all of these attributes that endeared my dad to so many people. I find of all of his names, but the one that I really relate to is the name of storyteller. So after my dad retired from his work in the health programming arena, he took on one of many second careers of writing the history of his memories from his own childhood, as well as that of our immediate family. After he had written a story, he'd send it to all of his kids to edit and double check for accuracy. Now this was a bit ironic because, as Sean had stated, one of his names was gifted to him based on his editing skills. I was fortunate to work with him during summer months. He'd hire me for not very much to come in and do whatever needed to be done around the office. And he was working for a nonprofit company in Maryland where they were creating and writing proposals that would be submitted to the government to win. I'm going to say that sentence over. He was working in Maryland for a nonprofit company creating and writing proposals in hopes to win government-funded programs that were dedicated to improving lives of women and children through greater health education around the world. During this proposal writing phase, he had a hawk eye with editing. His colleagues would bring him their portion of these written proposals that everyone was feverishly writing to get submitted on time, and he'd mark it up to perfection, and I always sign it the hawk. So that was another name where he got another meaning of the hawk. It was born out of his editing skills. And by the way, I think they won many proposals during his time there. So the hawk in his later years was asking and teaching his kids to sharpen and hone their eyes as he had done. Dad's stories had exceptional names. For example, the Flow Pig Big No-Seed Chicken Simplified System for Successful Driving in Asia. Another one, Zella's Hands. It was beautiful about his mom. And Can Anyone See Kano? Always entertaining, his stories were also very thought-provoking and inspiring. It's this last story, Can Anyone See Kano, that I want to share with you today. And it's a good one. Okay, so here's Dad. My wife and I lived and worked in Nigeria from 1988 through 1991. I was the director of a national family planning program, Family Health Services, funded by the Nigerian and U.S. governments, and implemented through the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, with whom I was employed. The program office was in Lagos, the old national capital on the southern coast of Nigeria. Although Lagos is still the major economic hub, Abuja in the center of the country officially became the capital on the 12th of December in 1991. As part of the National Family Planning Program, conferences and various types of training programs took place all over Nigeria's 36 states. Working with the Ministry of Health, we would bring together nurses, midwives, and sometimes doctors from outlying areas. Given the size of Nigeria, we occasionally took internal flights to the city where an event was to be held. There was a large waiting room for internal flights a short distance away from the international terminal. It is where I came to believe that Nigerians had a sixth sense for sensing distant incoming planes. I would be talking with colleagues or reading when the room full of passengers to be would rise. It seemed in unison and head en masse for the single door. It seemed like it was minutes later when the loudspeakers would blare out that the plane was coming. A Nigerian colleague and I were flying to Lagos to Maiduguri for a conference. Maiduguri is the capital of Borno State that lies in the far northeast corner of Nigeria. The state touches Niger on the north, Chad on the eastern very top, and Cameroon that flows southward for most of the eastern side of Nigeria. By air, Maiduguri was just over a 2-hour flight from Lagos, 762 miles. I was engaged in a book during the flight, and I was caught up in what I was reading. I had a dull sense that we were flying for what seemed a long time, and was aware it had become dark outside. I looked at my watch and discovered we'd been flying for nearly 3 hours. I'd been aware of the flight steward mumbling something to a few passengers, but he had disappeared into the cockpit and had never come out. Within a minute or two, the pilot spoke over the intercom. He said that all instrumentation had gone and that we had been flying blind as far as instruments and now light were concerned. He and the co-pilot made a decision some time back to try and land at Kano, 313 miles due west and 43 minutes flying time from our destination. Kano was large enough that the pilot and co-pilot were in hopes that its lights could be seen from the air, assuming we were flying in the right direction. The lights were not bright in Kano in around 1990. Think town with only partial electricity. Over the intercom, the pilot asked, "Can anyone see Kano?" Those of us in window seats immediately jerked our faces toward the window, and those with aisle seats immediately became seatmates with those of us in the window seats. We all pressed against the windows and stared into the inky darkness. You know, I can just imagine them all by these windows. I was not up on detailed Nigerian topography and was wondering where and even if we could land in the dark. We passengers had no idea how long we'd been flying in the direction of Kano, or if we were. It turned out that the steward knew the situation and had begun to panic. He was being restrained by the pilot and the co-pilot in the cockpit. After 10 to 15 very long minutes, the pilot announced, "We see Kano." Historically rich Kano, with its mud and clay walled market, with its forever dusty streets, and with just enough lights to be seen from above, Kano was our town that night. We were all fortunate in finding a hotel or some other place to sleep. The steward was still shaken and unburdened himself to my colleague, and that's how we learned that he had to be restrained so not to panic the passengers. The next morning, we had a direct and uneventful flight to Maiduguri. It was not until years later, after retelling the Kano story many times, that I began to appreciate the magnitude of the very dark situation we were in that night. When I now hear or read about the dark and deep troubles of nations or regions or even families, I think to myself, I hope there is someone involved that can see Kano. So, in my world, it was regularly Ricardo, or Pops, who helped me see Kano. I'm pretty certain that he is
thrilled that I'm sharing this story today with everyone here because his message is clear, and it's a little reminder from RB that all of us here today can now lend a helping hand to others to find Kano. Chris!
Chris, you're making quite an entrance.
In the sun because I'm freezing. I'll be very quick. So many great stories, and there's a saying that comes to mind thinking about PD. A situation will make for a very great time or a very good story. And with PD, you got both. When Margaret and Richard came back from Nigeria to Boston, and I started getting to know Carrie again. The price of getting married was paid in their house. But I showed up at their house, and there's this 55-year-old man tied to a tree, you know. I said, "What is that guy doing?" And Carrie's like, "Well, that's my dad. He's trying to cut down branches." And okay, guess I gotta go help. He would tell the story he told about him joining the Park Service, and I don't know where the dead bear carcass came from, but they took it upon himself to cut the head off and boil it and try and get the teeth out. Interesting fellow. The story about at 16, I think he finagled a trip across country on a train. You know, can you imagine now, 16 years old, just going across country by yourself on a train? What rich adventures he had. And then, you know, getting the grandkids to, you know, memorize and recite the Gettysburg Address. The burial of Sam McGee was a tricky one. But as you heard today, it's just the legacy and the mark of the impressions that someone leaves. That's a real gift. So, thanks PD for the very good times and the great stories. That's it.
I guess we're gonna leave the microphone up here, so I don't know where the program is. I'm not sure quite how long for, but if anybody would like to come up and share thoughts or stories or memories, feel welcome. I'll leave this on.
Four score and 7 years ago. I do still have it memorized though, which is pretty impressive if I do say so myself.
How much did you get paid for it?
$50, yeah, it was a pretty good deal, huh? I'm Emma, if you don't know me. I am the second eldest grandchild of Maggie and PD. The last two people that spoke are my beautiful parents. I'll tell a quick story. Leave time for anyone else who wants to come up. But every summer we would come back to the States to Maggie and PD's house, and it was a treat, both metaphorically and literally, because Maggie would stock the pantries with cookies and cereal and Rice Krispies and Twinkies. I had my first Twinkie there, and I became hooked. It was disgusting. I would like hide in the corner and have Twinkies, and I was like, I love America. The snacks are great. That's actually where my story is we were getting ready for dinner one night. Gosh, I can't remember how old I was. I must have been like 10 or something. And we were going out to eat, but I wanted a sweet treat. So I was in the kitchen, like probably sneaking some Chips Ahoy or Twinkies or Oreos or something. And PD walked in, and I was like, oh, like caught red-handed. I was like, oh, please don't tell my mom. And he's like, I forget exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of like, I got you, I support you, or like, don't worry about it. And I feel like that very much, as everyone has said today, was very much how he was. Like, you could have been doing anything. Sneaking Twinkies before dinner, having a bad day, failing a test, or doing the best you've ever done, you know, and he always had your back, he always got you. So it was a small instance that, I mean, I forget what he said exactly, I'm sure he wouldn't have remembered it at all, but it really, just the ethos of that stuck with me, and whenever you needed him, he was always there, he had your back, he got you, so that was something I'll always remember. And the Twinkies at Maggie's house. Great.
Thanks, Em.
I'll do the whole Gettysburg Address later if you guys, you know, come for snacks and stuff. That'll be the like late night show.
Hi guys, I'm Zach, the eldest grandchild. Sean was talking a little bit about superpowers, and thankfully mine is selective memory. Because I have the privilege to remember my grandfather as he was back in Cambodia, actually. Is this working? I don't know. Whatever.
Switch goes up.
So back in Cambodia, I was born with something called bilateral clubfoot, where my feet were turned out at different angles. I couldn't walk properly for the first 6-7 years of my life. My balance was off. I would fall out of chairs for no reason. So it terrified my mother, my aunt, my family. And we were climbing up the stairs of Angkor Wat, one of the temples in Cambodia. And my grandfather believed in me. He said, we'll figure it out. My mother, screaming at the top of her lungs, don't let that boy go up there. Don't let that boy go up there. Petey said, Allison, we'll figure it out. And we did. And he took me to the top of the temple. And that was one of the first times where I got to feel like I got to be part of. And that really exemplified the kind of guy that PD was, that he would make you feel part of. And like Sean said, he had to throw hard. For me, it was figure it out. And I always appreciated that.
It's not. Hello?
Wiggle the bottom.
Hello? Oh. I'm not sure if that's working. You can push it.
Oh, now it's working, I hear.
Here we go. I think it might be working.
I'm going to take an opportunity, and I want all the cousins and the nephews and nieces, Kathy and Ron and Zone back there. I don't know if any Larsons are here. They're here. Brett and them here. But there's a lot of us cousins that live here, and I wanted to leave a message to the family. Although I didn't introduce myself, I'm Hiram. My mother is Marilyn and Dave, and they're actually resting over here on the side of the road. But this area here, there's nearly 300 ancestors of Uncle Dick and Richard here. So I think we need to remember this area as being a hallowed ground for the Scott family, the Sturgis family. Richard's family, or his parents, are just resting over here. And I'm sure there's a great reunion up in heaven where they get together and get to know some. I don't have too many memories of Uncle Dick, but I know my mother often talked about some of the stories Richard talked about a cobra in the toilet. Other interesting places he had. I actually ran into Richard a couple times scholastically when I studied at BYU. He has several professors that were still there when I went to school. And we knew him as being a very intelligent and learned person here. And I just wanted to make sure that we need to meet all the cousins together. One thing Richard did before the last couple of years that he was actually more stateside and stayed in one place for a time is he would get together with everybody and visit with them. And some of those have passed us now, but that was great and enjoyable visits with them. So I leave that with you. This is a resting place for Richard, and it's a great place here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I remember Uncle Dick being there when my mother passed. And I had some hard things to do. One very hard thing to do, and I didn't want to do it. My grandmother didn't want to do it. And we called Uncle Dick, and he came, and he did it for us, and I am very, very grateful for it. When my mother came home, and I was born, Uncle Dick was still there at the house. So I have some very fond memories of him. And I remember when Richard and Margaret got married. And they lived in a little apartment down there in Provo. And I got into Margaret's makeup and nobody got mad at me. But I wanted to wear makeup and I wasn't even 8 years old. I remember Uncle Dick always being interested in what I was doing and being there for me even after my mother passed. He was always there and he was always calling me up and seeing how I was doing. And I will miss him very much, but I know that he is having a very big reunion with all of his brothers and sisters and grandparents. Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, I guess we're going to ask Dean Barnes to come up and give the grave dedication. And again, thank you. The one thing my mom asked me, I was so nervous about talking that I forgot everything. She said, please thank everybody for coming and comforting us today. So let's go back to the beginning. Thank you all for coming and comforting us today. Dean. Afterwards, everybody's welcome to Carrie's house in Park City. We'll give the address or just get in touch with us, but there's some snacks and food and we can all get together and share more stories. Oh, and Emma's going to do the Gettysburg Address.
Once again, surprise, surprise. Okay.
What? Come together this day by the power of the Holy Eucharistic priesthood. We dedicate and consecrate this plot of land for the remains of Richard Bernell Sturgis. And we ask that it be a hallowed place, that all family and friends may come and visit when they can, and we ask thee to bless the family at this time, bless and console them, watch over each one of them, and bless them with the blessings of their Savior. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Which type are gonna rise at home?
Oh, okay.
I know, it's great. Noel, how are you? I guess we're all familiar with everybody's name. Names more than faces. I know.